Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is, of course, Tuesday, July 22nd, 2014. To justify war, you need a scapegoat. Posted this on Facebook earlier at AMTV, at Facebook at AMTV Media. Please join us, like us, help us get our message out to more and more people. To justify war, you need a scapegoat. Whether or not it was Saddam Hussein in Iraq, or it was the boogeyman that made up Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, or it was Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, or Bashar al-Assad recently in Syria, or now it's the man of the hour, Vladimir Putin, and it has everything to do with Ukraine, and Ukraine being a chess piece of the power structure that exists and moves and shakes politics and economies today, and all about Russia and the new Cold War. Of course, all of this orchestrated by the financial elite and by the power structure that runs the world today. I spoke of this earlier with several videos. A recently released video earlier this morning, Putin blamed for MH17 to launch attack on BRICS, World Bank, the establishment of a competitor to the World Bank and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which has largely been controlled by the West and enjoyed by the West and Western power for some time now. A direct challenge to the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. Motive enough to demonize Vladimir Putin as the next Hitler. Also put out a great video a few days ago, The Mystery of Flight MH17, Critical Questions, which, by the way, have still not been answered. Again, there's been zero evidence provided by the West, the United States, and the mainstream media to link the alleged on-the-ground missiles that were shot at MH17, a plane, by the way, flying through a war zone, which had diverted its path. Kind of makes you wonder why it was flying there in the first place, unless they wanted to shoot it down and perhaps use it as an engineered false flag event. But again, folks, to justify war, you need a scapegoat. Notice how there's only two people here that are still alive. Bashar al-Assad, and there's been threats on his life. In fact, he was living on a warship for much of last year, revolving around the alleged chemical attack that killed innocent civilians, men, women, and children in Ghouta. And of course, all of you remember that. The mainstream media pitched it as being perpetrated by the Bashar al-Assad regime. They always like to use the word regime to propagandize what they think is evil governments. They never call it a government. But all of this proven to be false. All of this proven to be hearsay. In fact, the evidence pointed to the insurgents on the ground funded and armed by the West that were actually, in reality, responsible for the chemical attack in Ghouta not too long ago that killed men, women, and children. UN investigators came to this conclusion. And now we're seeing the same thing now in Ukraine with Flight MH17, and again, short-term memory loss here in the United States of America and abroad. Short-term memory. We're seeing the same type of propaganda being pitched and engineered by the mainstream media and the power elite and the structure that makes up the New World Order to demonize Vladimir Putin as the next Hitler. Again, to justify war, folks, you need a scapegoat, and it's exactly why Vladimir Putin is being demonized by the West. In the meantime, the FAA has now issued a warning to all flights to Tel Aviv, Israel, prohibiting their flight path. Again, why didn't they do this for Flight MH17? Why did they allow it to fly over a known war zone where a known conflict has already been raging? Again, the United States federal government arming the insurgents on the ground, the terrorists, just like they did in Syria, overthrowing government after government, overthrowing the rightful Ukrainian government, Viktor Yanukovych, who has since sought refuge in Russia, and are now propagandizing Putin as if he invaded Crimea, when this is the exact opposite of the actual truth. Again, Russia in focus, Vladimir Putin in focus. In the meantime, the FAA telling U.S. airlines not to fly to Tel Aviv, as if now they're going to warn flights not to fly over potential war zones. Again, all this propaganda being used by Israel and the United States to make it look like Israel's defending itself when really, in reality, these are just the facts. It's not my opinion. They are the aggressor in Gaza. They are the ones that launched the ground invasion, not the other way around. And, of course, men, women, and children are dying, innocent civilians, as a result. Here we have a report from the Washington Examiner. U.S. flight ban could be Hamas's biggest success in latest clash with Israel. You notice how they frame this and how they phrase this? This assumes that Hamas is responsible for the missile strike that shot down MH17 from the ground. Again, there's been zero evidence to prove this. There's been no formal investigation. America and the Western media jumped on the bandwagon immediately within hours, blaming pro-Russian separatists on the ground without even investigating the truth. And you see how the mainstream media phrases U.S. flight ban could be Hamas's biggest success, as if they've already confirmed that Hamas is responsible for the downing of MH17. And all of this, of course, linked back to the boogeyman, the favorite boogeyman of the hour. Again, they just change it by the hour depending on which country the United States and the West is looking to invade at the time, potentially because they might be launching a competitor nation bank, as is the case with the competitor and rival to the World Bank being launched by the BRICS nations. Meet your new parents, Russia and China, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Again, beginning and starting their own World Bank so that they can trade in their own currencies and move away from the U.S. dollar for good. And all of this a very real and legitimate threat to the United States sovereignty, and the long-term sustainability of the U.S. dollar. But of course, this has all been propelled by the financial elite here in the States that have raped the American people through financial bailouts and trillions of dollars worth of stimulus, 0% interest rates, and a giant wealth transfer from the middle class and poor to the rich, the same people that engineered the crisis in the first place, only helped it along, now acting like the spoiled brat that they are, attacking and pitching their favorite boogeyman of the hour, Vladimir Putin, as the next Hitler. Again, you need a scapegoat to justify a war, folks. And again, the FAA not issuing any warnings to flight MH17, even though there was another flight, MH370, that mysteriously disappeared. And again, there's been no evidence to prove it even crashed in the first place, that it's not being equipped with a nuclear bomb, a warhead, and then, God forbid, slammed into an American or European city in the not-too-distant future. Failed to issue a warning just days ago for flight MH17, but is now issuing warning after warning in the defense of Israel. Can you see the propaganda, folks? Can you see how easy it truly is to read between the lines? Home of Hamas, according to the Times of Israel, military head hit. Netanyahu now asks U.S. to lift the flight ban. Well, isn't that convenient? European Safety Agency to recommend airlines to avoid Tel Aviv. Again, all of this engineered propaganda, folks. Very easy to read between the lines. The U.S. accusing Russia without any evidence, just like they accused Bashar al-Assad in Syria with the Ghouta chemical attack, even though it turned out that it was the U.S.-sponsored terrorists on the ground that perpetrated the chemical attack. Now expect you and I to believe that Russia created the conditions for the shoot down of flight MH17. Again, how can you believe this government? How can you believe any government, for that matter, without an independent investigation? Again, UN figureheads confirming in the case of Syria that it was actually the U.S.-funded terrorists on the ground that initiated the chemical attack, this gross humanitarian war crime. Yet now they're pitching the same propaganda for this guy, Vladimir Putin, who is now on the defensive, engaged in the propaganda war with the United States of America. To justify a war, folks, you need a scapegoat. And the favorite scapegoat of the hour today is Vladimir Putin. It's all about Ukraine. It's all about the chess piece that makes up this country. It's all about the destabilization, the active destabilization of the Middle East, which has been the game plan of the United States and their interests for arguably decades, if not longer. And we now have major conflict arising with the launch of a competitor BRICS World Bank to rival the Western-controlled, dominated World Bank and International Monetary Fund, which has largely granted America and Western interests unfair power compared to the rest of the world for years. And it's not to say that we won't find the same corruption and see the same evil with these nations, the BRICS. But what we know, without a shadow of a doubt, is that we are currently living in just of a corrupt regime, and just of a corrupt system, and just of a corrupt government, as they pitch Vladimir Putin and Russia here in our own home country, the United States of America. Again, white flags being replaced in New York City today on the Brooklyn Bridge, showing and making a bold statement that the United States has surrendered. Whether or not you take this as a surrender of the U.S. dollar to the rising financial dominance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, or you take this as a surrender due to the and as a result of the engineered immigration crisis here at our borders. All of this is a surrender of the United States sovereignty propelled by the New World Order paradigm that makes up the financial elite and the power structure today that shapes and is actively reshaping global politics and initiating great change on your behalf. Again, all of this about revamping the globe, the integration of new currency, whether or not this is physical or digital, doesn't matter. This is the direction we have been pushed, and we're being pushed for years now. And it is all a part of the game plan. I'm Christopher Green. Get it out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting and in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.